Hello. Mit deinem Residenzschloss, das war schon.
So, a warm welcome to everybody who's here. We have finally Martin Fröhlich in the house. He made it after his flight cancellation last week. He is here, and I have the pleasure to introduce him. He is a German architect. He is professor for architecture at the ETH in Lausanne, and he is founder of AFF Architekten, based in Berlin and also in Lausanne, as far as I understood. I'm very inspired by his work. His work is a radical work. His work is unconventional. It's focused on object, and once it comes to existing buildings, I like his interventions, like in the Residenzschloss in Dresden, which unfortunately we didn't visit when we were there. But actually maybe we see some projects and some pictures of this special project which interests us all. I wish us a pleasant and interesting, inspiring evening. Thank you very much.
Yeah, welcome also from my side, and thank you for the invitation. I think for us it's an honor because still there is also architects, they're throwing, let's say, beautiful words on themselves. So we still impressed, let's say, as the main reference of also how to found an office with a kind of outcoming of your study time of the history of GMP, I think. Still this kind of airport project is a kind of iconic thing which we also try to defend in Berlin. Even the office tried to make a trap, not to change it, by building a second one and to create political discussions about that. So that's the honor from my side. The second one is also the thing is that there is this AAC, so that the office is also donating a kind of podium to offer research for young generation with these courses, what they are doing. So that is also amazing that this kind of let's say, structure to build up architectural culture on another level, not only making, let's say, work with clients, that it find a place here in the house. There's still, let's say, also space to evolve. So for the next, I made the ironic thing when I came in, I said, I'm wondering why the students are not sitting in the first line and the founders are sitting on the back one. So that would be the next gesture to do also, to put you more in presence. Yeah, but that's the problem of that thing today. Everything is in change. I also have to apologize that my flight was cancelled, so I'm still flying. So that is the problem what we're discussing huge. Now, for instance, in our school, it's forbidden to make study trips by using airplanes. And there's also this kind of change. But let's come and not to extend the evening for 4 hours. And when you get boring, you have to raise up your hand and to stop. That's good. And then I will give the word to you who raise up the hand and to make interventions. You can also ask questions if there's something in between. Maybe it's more a kind of dialogue. So I tried to do the thing. There was not a misunderstanding, but I just heard when I was invited here, there is one thing you're working on the let's say, heart of Saxonian culture, which is in medicine the hardest work to do, to change a heart of something or to work on the heart of a person. So I thought, okay, I have to talk about a little bit about Saxonia, that you get a little bit in this context, and also about maybe to make a view out as architects how we could see our work. It's also interesting we have to talk about the project what we did 10 years ago now. It was a small renovation in the residence in the Saxonian castle of Dresden, and then we did also before another project in another castle in Freiberg, so I will talk about these two projects. And then in between I will put really a heavy stone of philosophy for you. And there you have to raise up your hand if it gets too complicated and if it's too boring. So I don't know. There's the first thing. We have guests also from Dresden here. They will immediately correct me if I tell wrong things, but that's also good. So just to come into the topic, it's like the apero. Let's say the Residenzschloss of Dresden, which we won a competition to build up an exposition and to do restoration on a small part of that castle. So the main thing what you have to understand if you come from a cultural, let's say different cultural backgrounds, this castle is finally the full identity of the Saxonian culture. And the king who was living there, or the kings, they battled like with other people in cultural invention, like Louis XIV, for instance, like the royal of France, and they tried to position them in economy, in culture, in business. No, economy is the same, but also in how the country will evolve, and in luxury, and also in science. And that is maybe also the most important thing. And that was a part, so we had to settle down with this exposition in a very small part of the castle. And what you also have to also to know that this castle was destroyed during the Second World War, like the city in all. And to rebuild this castle after the Second World War, and also after the reunion of the two German parts, that was the kind of thing that there was a quotation to the Minister of Saxonia: when this renovation is finished, finally the two German parts get reunited again. That is one belief in that, and it's also a kind of to understanding culture in a different way. So that was the kind of hope. And you see also the influences from there. They're coming to Berlin. They want to reconstruct, or they did now the castle. Also the castle to reconstruct. Even they don't have a king. It's not like in the British Empire. You saw that ceremonies in the last time. So that is another culture, but also to understand a little bit the German background. So the castle itself was settled and was very well known in this kind of when they did the Canaletto, these paintings of the city, and also how architectural forms and let's say knowledge get developed. And there's two interesting projects also to see. There's of course this church which was reconstructed. There's another thing what also we could discuss about later if this is something good. And then also we have the castle, and then we have the house called Hofkirche in English. I don't know. So that is a church of the king. A cathedral, but yeah, it's just a cathedral. Yeah, it's a cathedral. It's a cathedral of the king. And also there, it's very interesting to read cultural traces, because, for instance, this king had power, and then he said, "I want to have more power," and he converted from Protestant belief to Catholic belief. But the entire country was Protestant, and he was a Catholic. And not to create a kind of war in between, he built up that church with integrating all the religion procedures, what you have to do in the Catholic way, inside of an object. So this church has a very special form. You see it like a big mass, and he has 3 rounds around the kind of main corpus, that he could do all the ceremonies inside, not to get in discussion with the peoples around. So that was intelligence, how to build up things in the past. Today they are a little bit in different manners, and sometimes they don't know how to do that. And so this is a small appendix of the house. What was our job to do? It called Georgenbau, because it was also related to one of the kings. So it was more a zone of habitation in a different way, and also to representation. There was one part what we not did, but we were very appreciated by that. That was a kind of small ballroom, which was called like that, which was completely destroyed. But they did the kind of photo documentation before, And then there was the question for the entire castle how we can reconstruct things. So we can do it after the photographs, how we can work with craftsmanship, how we can keep craftsmanship. And that is what they did. They did this restoration of this kind of Ballsaal in a very historic manner by spending a lot of money in it, by also keeping this kind of tradition, which is interesting in architectural thinking. There is this, let's say, reference what we're using usually if you know Japanese culture, the Ise Shrine, so which is a part in Japan which get every 20 years rebuilt in 2 plots just to keep the kind of knowledge of craftsmanship. And that is also a kind of very important thing in our profession, and also to keep that. So in this part, we had to showcase 2 main exhibitions of the royal family. One was the more or less wonder chamber. It was a collection of weapons, of small elements coming in this kind of obsession to collect and to get knowledge about the world. And the other one was a collection of coins. So let's say the economic model of the world very in the beginning. And as the building was reconstructed and there was, let's say, inside no historical traces, we came up with a kind of search how we can present that collection. And of course, then you're walking through kind of references, you're looking how in that time knowledge was perceived and discovered. And then we were based, let's say, in the design on one reference image is the Saint Hieronymus, Jérôme, in his cage, sitting and studying. And so that was the house inside of the house. So there was very formal from our, let's say, point of view. So we said, okay, we do a house inside of the house, and we do a chamber, and that could be the thing. So the view is very focused, and we can look to all that kind of small objects. They're related together and how they are composed. And this is also with curatorship of the collectors. They could tell which coin has to be where and how you understand business, because there is a story, you know, where the name dollar comes from. So the dollar was usually in Saxony there was a value which called thaler. And by traveling to business, also a lot of Germans went to the US, so also that name gets transformed. So finally dollar came from Saxonia, which is strange in history. You're sitting now here in the US American state and you look at these coins and you have this kind of connection. We can tell you other stories about how we influenced America, so I can tell you the story of the Broadway if you want. So that is one thing. So that shows a little bit the relationship, how the Saxonians, and that was also as Jung came in and they said, we will show you what we do with your castle. So that is, if you are in Dresden, maybe every second inhabitant is a small king. It's not like Louis XIV because maybe he had so many children, but they somehow in the DNA they feel that this is our proudness and this thing. And so we build up that thing, so this kind of collection, so you're inside of that kind of cabinet, very concentrated, and the things are composed from curators, understanding history. And then there were also a moment of transition where you go out of this kind of very focused view, and you could also, there have some extension outside, there's no photos existing, because you could also go out and to have a look on the city. So that is a kind of different way of curatorship. There's the opposite, if you know the museum in Copenhagen, for instance, like in art museums now, they're starting also things that you're looking at an art piece and you see also the city behind, so you can compare the things. So that is another way of curatorship. And there's more this kind of enclosed view because it was the reference to the history and also to go in this continuous way of thinking. So there's different rooms, 3 of them, let's say, going through this development because it was based, and this will be the story later, why there are so many coins, because the riches was based on harvesting silver in the mountains. So that was also the reason, but that is another story. We will come later to that. And the second thing, it was due to this kind of collecting these elements to harvesting, let's say, also resources. The kings, they had also extremely interest in science. And also to develop that things, and even the king itself was interested to do craftsmanship. So he had also tools to make mechanic works also in that, and there was a huge investment in that time also, and collections about that. And then also, of course, of weapons, that also to show the power of the empire a little bit, and and they were investing in weapons. So we went there. We were so impressed because they had weapons. They looked like a knife, but it was a pistol to shoot, for instance. And so they had even pistols. They were a knife afterwards. So it was. So if you think all these James Bond tools were invented in the last 20 years, now they came from the 15th century of that time. And this was based a little bit also on that kind of idea. In the beginning 16th century, there was the first time when they start to travel also to collect. They had time for that. So the kings, they had time for this. The poor people not. So they were able to collect these things, to impose them on the walls and to compare them and to try to understand. On one thing, it was a little bit fashion, of course, to show I have a whale, I have a piece of a crocodile and so on. But it was also a matter to discover the world on the end, to what is the made of. So, and that's I don't know. We were not allowed to take a lot of photos, so it's no, I don't know. So that, for instance, small tools, they're looking crazy, but there's just 4 elements to shoot to span them, and so that is what is Armbrust in English, I think. I don't know. So shooting tools. And so this we exposed also in discussion with the curators in vitrines in the kind of very neutral new environment. The colors, they look a little bit fashion, you know, you think, okay, today I would take these colors. You see also that architecture can also have traces of time, of taste. And that is also something after to showing that project with a long distance, you have to think about, was this the right decision, how we are positioning ourselves at the moment and how we can develop that forward. But to take this kind of surfaces, there were a little bit also a kind of reference to find new types of craftsmanship, to do types of furnishing. So like you have the Japanese layers of paintings. So even this color, how it was made on the walls was a little bit, we were very passionate in that to do it. And the objects get exposed and you could walk through and you can read this kind of history by a guide also to understand how this richness and culture and economy was built up in Saxonia. Very modern in this kind of ancient building in a certain way. And that's the question, modern, also to using that word, what is modern? And modernity, so usually it comes also from the region of model, no? Modern and model, it's inscribed in this thing. And that comes maybe to the next part of the lecture we would have. And then we had, of course, to build up, there was a staircase missing due to the war situation, so we had to build up a staircase, so which was for us a little bit also kind of passion. Can we create for that king, let's say, or for that building a kind of entire object, like they had this in small ones, so we were so passionate looking at that small thing, so we designed an entire huge object, which was difficult also to craft that, because how you fold in metal that things, so sometimes you draw something as an architect and then the guy is coming, no, impossible, I cannot fold this is my machine, how it goes, and yeah, we want to have this. So there is a kind of discourse about what you want as an architect and what is technically possible and what is sustainable. And that is also a huge question. So if you want to invest more in something, is this sustainable, yes or not, and what is the right choice? So then now today we have this huge staircase built as a kind of metal object to be in another materiality, to stand there and to use these different types of metal also to showcase this. Because it was quite crazy. In the collection of the king, he had what is Rüstung? Armor. So he had armors but the armor of the king was made out of silver or gold. Totally stupid because he could put the knife through. So it was also kind of this ambiguity. You have a form which showcases you, I'm so rich, I can do it by gold, but it will never protect you. So it was this kind of obscure thing of culture, what arrives in a certain way. So we were also confronted with this question in a certain way, but as young, we were quite young, so it was 10 years ago, I think, and the other project 20 years before. So we also try to evolve us now and to reflect critically to that kind of development and your choices. And when the thing is culture, when the thing is passion or form of an architect, when it's the wish of a client, and we have to guide them to something, and that is quite difficult. So, and it gets really in discussion, I think, also for further projects for everybody of us. So, coming back maybe to that image also, again, to provoke you a little bit on this question, that you go on, let's say, on the box of Pandora of knowledge on the end in this 15th century with the castle in Dresden. So if you've been not there, you have to go there. But maybe now you will go with a different viewpoint, point of view there, and to read that, because they're very ambitious also to showcase in the castle this kind of, that you understand the cultural development of that things. So that is important there. And also the kind of, and not only to look at the castle itself. So there was this reference what we had before, and later when we start also to read more about this, there was more of that paintings of Saint Jérôme in the study case, and there's one, for instance, of Albrecht Dürer. He also did this. And in this time, this thing was painted, let's say, first Instagram. It was painted because they had several variations of that. And it was painted, it showed the scholastic classification of virtues in moral, theology, and intellectual terms. So that was all in that image. So you could read why the lion is there, why this kind of head is there, how he's studying, to be concentrated. So it was a kind of universe. So you have to follow 20 Instagram channels, and then you will also get this kind of worldview on the thing. So, and this was also that type of collections. And then there is one important piece in the collection. It's an altar image, which is in the church of Annaberg, no? And that was usually painted for religious reasons. So there were the story of Christ and then Jesus and all of this. But inside there was this painting, and this painting is incredibly important. And today I will look totally different to that. And because this was to showcase how they're harvesting the silver, how they get out, let's say, all the kind of richness of the country. But what you can see also there, they destroyed all the forest. So the entire let's say, Erzgebirge, if you go there, all this forest is not a forest, it's a kind of plantage of trees, because this was made because they harvest all the silver out of that. And if you talk today about let's say, consumption of resources, and you look at this, you try to understand that economics starts there, and also to harvest things starts there, because they had to burn all that wood to get carbon out, and to melt the steel, and to get all these things. So that is the first story of impact on nature on things. So we start for the exhibition. We had this discussion. We can make a movie out of that, but ironically, and that is the story about also to see and to travel there and to look at Dresden, how it settled down, and how that things. So if you're looking at this, the question, let's say, in architecture, and maybe also in projects you're developing, I learned that you work more, let's say, on flexible programs, on offices, etc., because you're not destroying the castle. But let's say today we have a lot of changement in the society, even the discussion about the airport, what we can dismantle there, what we have to add. It's a huge discussion of your generation, I think, and you will be tackled by this. So you have a lot of clients that will come and they say, I don't like my building, it's not efficient, there's no money in it, we have to get more, etc. And please dismantle it. And what we can do, we reuse the things, and then you can put this on the second-hand burst, and we send it to Africa. Now there's a huge campaign in Switzerland. We will take all the dismantled houses, and we can send the windows to Ukraine because there's war, and it looks very nice, but the entire story usually is wrong. I think that's my opinion, and that's why let's use a kind of reference and also to provoke you to read other books than architecture. To talk about matter, content, and container. So, as we said in the current architectural discourse, we have this question of the ecological crisis in a certain way, and how we can understand this question, material, program, or form. Because maybe that helps you also to talk about how you will organize your office on the end. Because maybe now we are at COVID, you are doing that, what we have in 20 years. So what will happen there? Still, it happens in the same castle. So there's a book, or there is a philosopher who died. It's called Wilhelm Flusser, by a car accident, which is kind of recommendation to read what he did. There's one book, it's called Dinge und Undinge. There's a lot of them, but he was usually a media philosopher. And he wrote an essay, which called Stöcke, or Cans. That was first published in 1972, and then this was republished in 1993 in that book. So what he's doing, he invites the reader to accompany him on a walk on the forest. Okay, so I just took one forest. It's a friend of us. He's a photographer. He made a series of photographs about 1 hour on a black and white image, and what you see the stick is the sun, the movement of the sun. So in this simple act, Flusser, he shows us the diversity of different possible cultural perspectives. And he goes on to explore also the act of design, which is quite interesting, and maybe that is also in the trace of this history, what we learned in Dresden, that influenced us also in a certain way. And Flusser describes 4 possible ways to walk through the forest. Okay, now we are in a forest. Forget everything, Dresden is not more there, we are sitting in a forest. You hear the birds, you see the leaves, the wind is coming, you smell, now is a good time for mushrooms, and so. For each, he examines the walker's relationship to the forest. So when you go through a forest, there's different relationships. And he turns by holding up the mirror to how we look at the world. And so he describes in a philosophical way how we're doing that. And we also oscillating through that for different ways. So the first is, he said, lost in thought. So you know that you go through the forest, you're lost in thought. So lost in thought, we discard to the forest ourselves. And finally, you can only go by lost in thought if you have no problems, if you are economically free. So that is usually the king, he was going through that lost in thought. So he was able to be in the metasphere and to be over that entire world of the forest. So that is Dresden on a certain way, and then he was also able to create all these things. The second is observing the forest. So what is observing the forest? So we consider in that moment the forest as a scientific model, because we're looking at the forest and we look, there is a deer coming, we can eat that, there are herbs growing, there are seasons there, it means that we have to heat in winter, so there is a kind of knowledge, and you see also the resources of the forest. The richness, why they have in Dresden, why the castle is there, why you're working on that project, that was a story that there were travelers from the south of Europe coming to Saxony, and they found by random in the 11th century, by looking at the forest, observing the forest, they found silver, because it was so high on the ground that they said, wow, this stone's there, that is silver, the guys have silver here. So that it was really easy to harvest, and that was the beginning of the richness of the country. And then the second thing is enjoying the forest. Enjoying the forest is, today, let's describe this, if you go there, you enjoy the forest, you try to get once with the forest. Let's say these are all the people, they are looking, let's say, not to put your feet on the plants, so they're also getting part of this. This is maybe the new generation, which also tries to respect the resource as the forest. So that is the fourth level. And then, let's come to architecture, or to design. There is this moment when you say, I'm looking for the way home. And that is crazy, because in that moment, as we are intelligent persons, by looking for the way home, you know that it's easier to walk. So first there is this kind of thing, by looking for the way home, is bases you, if you read all the text, it's very complex, but looking for the way home, first it puts you in the knowledge that you know the territory. Okay, so you have, today we go in Google Maps and then you put where point is, but it puts you on this meta level of that where people measuring the world, then you come to Humboldt, etc. But there's also the other thing that you know, if I have to go home, maybe I need a stick to walk. It's much easier and I can go faster than that. And that is the interesting moment, he describes that. In that moment where you have the idea to look for a stick in the forest turns in a depot of resources. So the forest in that moment is a kind of warehouse, and you say, I need a stick, so how I can do that stick? And he says, walking up a forest path, I just read the things, walking up the forest path, we stop to look around for a branch we could use as a walking stick. And that moment in which we decide to search for a potential stick, our perception of the forest change completely, as does the appearance of the forest itself. This is an example of how we appreciate of things changes depending how we're looking at them. So that is the world change, and we're looking in another way. So in the moment one thoughts to turn to having a stick to aid walking, the forest became to branches of potential for use as a stick. One thing is interesting, there's a design strategy now happening. The first is you're looking as a piece of wood, which has the form of a stick, because the form of the stick is inscribed in your knowledge. So what is there? It was the stick there, or it was the form there, or the material. So he accelerate between this kind of three categories. So the form, it's quite, in German it's quite easier to say, it's the form, and is the Idee, so the idea of the stick, what you have. And the program is, I'm using the program, the stick as a walking stick. So there is a kind of acceleration between form, then the idea of what could be, and the program, and how it looks. And then also of the material. You will not look for a stick in a kind of stone. If you're in a basalt place, maybe you will find a piece of wood which looks like, with stone, which looks like a stick. But as all the forest looks like a stick, so there is this acceleration. So that means, in short, we're looking for wood in the form of a walking stick. So as our means of production are limited, as I said, so there's not the things, you're not looking for a carbon fiber thing. You will design only what is there as a resource. And that is quite interesting if you look at architectural design. So also with the staircase, what we had there, what we built. So if you say, I have an intention, I have a program, what I have to deliver, and I have an idea of a form, have I be intended to do it out of steel, like we did it there in Dresden, or could it be also of the resources what is there in Dresden, for instance, in that environment? So then the staircase would be looking totally different. So we took steel from China, I don't know what else. So that is this question. So the question of what is the resource, what is the program, what you want to do, and what is the form, finally, it get mirrored. And that is finally also why also springs from it. I have to not that I get lost. So what he tells on the end, he says, or in another book, what he says, form and material. There's another sentence where he writes. He says, forms are neither discoveries or inventions, neither platonic ideas for fictions, but containers coupled together for phenomena, for models. And then he goes deeper. I will not. This we can discuss afterwards if you want. What is the model and why we will die once, because we can never attach the thing, because we're working every time on models, and the model is just a kind of test till the next model will come. And so it's kind of complex things, but that is plus or points in form and material. That. So coming back to architecture, rather than being constantly preoccupied with inventing new forms for new programs in different materials as answers to the challenges of the day, architecture should today more than ever concern itself from recognizing the adaptability of the individual spaces of form, material, and program. And that is what you're doing. So you're working in a castle and you try to work on offices. Maybe in 20 years it's a Bauhaus. Or I don't know, what else? Or a new king is there, maybe. Or it's a kind of greenhouse. The question for how you're programming this. When any form can be reproduced in any material, because you saw that on the stick, so we can have a form of a stick, of a branch, in different types of material. Any program may fit in any form. So that is usually the thing. And there's a kind of misorientation that is good. We're talking about oval forms, because the office is also well known for stadiums. So if you're looking at oval forms, everybody thinks an oval form is a stadium, which is so deep inscribed in our visual image. But is that really true? Because looking at the amphitheater of Rome, this was a kind of stadium in that time, so was so deeply inscribed. But then there were two important projects which not realized. This was mostly, let's say, developed, and it had to stop because the Sixtus V, he died. And he tried to turn this Colosseum, which was empty, so the gladiators' fights get out of fashion. And then he said, okay, I have to reinvest in business, like the Saxonians. I have to reinvest in business in Rome. And I want to support, and I make a project, and he really start to do that, to turn the Colosseum in a wool factory. And to housing, to produce wool, to maintenance wool, and to be there. And he really started that, and then he died. So what you see today is a kind of reconstructing of the things also. So that was a wool factory, not an amphitheater. And then there was another project of Carlos Fontana. He proposed to put the main church of Rome, the center, in that kind of Colosseum, which would be also amazing. No? You have that big church, the people sitting around, and we will not have the projects which are there today. And there was discourse in between architects in this time. They said, no, that is a reference, we have to keep that, and it's patrimoine, it's, how it's called, it's heritage. So they decide against that on the end, but otherwise we would have the biggest stadium with a church, which is also happening in Rome. But finally, this is what we know today. It's this kind of ruin which we go there, and the kind of heritage of that things. So that is maybe also the thing the office will invest in the next times, how we can stadiums and to turn them into other things. We did with students in Lausanne one, they will destroy a stadium, and we said, come on, that could be a beautiful housing complex to do that. And if you're looking at this question of architecture, and we try to search for different examples, how people dealing with form and material, we also could change our perception. So there is the very well-known chapel of Corbusier, which everybody thinks that is a kind of concrete building, but it has just this thick plaster on the surface. But usually it's 70% of the building is reuse. So it's totally, let's say, if we could launch this in a reuse book, nobody will do that, but it's a reuse building because that was the chapel before. It was destroyed also in the Second World War. And he rebuilt that entire building of the same stones. And he even used it in different levels, how to use it, how to work with that material. You can see that on there's a monument for a staircase, which is built with the stones. There is the housing complex for the monks, where the stones even visible in the plaster facade, and then also just this big roof, which was the technical invention in this time to bring concrete in a kind of new form and engineer discussion. It was so strong published that the image of that building is also turned today in this direction. There's another example, if you stay longer in Germany, it's the church of St. Anne in Düren, which was also deconstructed or destroyed, sorry, and there was Rudolf Schwarz who reconstructed after the war the church with the same material but in another form, but keeping all that things. What is interesting here, also in typology-wise, for the church, for instance, Ronchamp, there was this thing. He also turns the typology. So there's also the chapel inside and outside, for instance. So there's also sometimes a small move in types, and to do that, here it's the church with the tower and the same material. And that is also what we're working sometimes, and we got also now strong on these projects. We had a rotten house, what was not to keep, so we used this to imprint the house as a form of a framework, which how to use with the resource what is there, and to follow up, let's say, your project instead of to take everything off and to put it somewhere else on the table and find a new solution for that. Because now there's also competition starting that they're building up this kind of material basis, and you have to work with this kind of elements which are there. So they try to make this kind of circular thinking. Then we're studying also things with students, so we're doing projects with them by building up pavilions. That was one what we built, which is now a school room in a zoo, so which was also built with the same material in different forms. And that is maybe a little bit the philosophical part, a little bit also to give you some other inputs, not only to make, let's say, presentations of project where we also think about what we did there in this time. But that was finally also how to understand on our own project what we did in Freiberg when we were winning this competition to restore a castle which had also this kind of transition of use. And so we did, on the end, the project was so rich that we made this book about it. And but first, we start to enter this project with the history of Saxonia. Now we do the bridge to Dresden again. And Dresden is only rich because the guys in Freiberg, 16 kilometers from there, they found the silver there. They harvested the silver, and then the king was also living there. And then he said once, now, geographic-wise, Dresden has a river, he has terraces, we can have wine there. Let's say he was the first person maybe reading the 10 points of permaculture, reading the territory, understanding the quality of it, and going there. So he moved to Dresden, and the castle finally was built to protect finally the village itself and the mines. And it was situated there, but and he built this kind of this time in the Renaissance manner. He looked for architects from far away to have a beauty castle. They were very proud, so these were closest in that time, so also handcrafting, so you could see the richness of them. And when he died, you have this kind of funeral images. You can imagine what happened there. So if you look at this, you get the feeling like the Queen in Britain. So that was a time, it was 1691. So, and then he moved away, and the castle was not more interest. So he felt in ruins, but there was a thing when Napoleon was coming to Europe and occupying all these fields. He was a very practical guy, so he turned this Renaissance castle in the depot. So it was turned in the corn depot. The king also had to say we have to save corn to survive. So it was the first storage building. And then Napoleon also was there, and he used that for hospital to put his soldiers in the war. So a Renaissance castle of representation, a storage building for corn, and then they wrote, so storage is like that. Inside it was also looking like that. So they built a wood structure inside up to have the levels for the corn. It was just 2 meters high or even less. You could see how they filled up the corn of the weight. So there were stripes here to have this. And the competition was, okay, please, let's do a museum inside. So you see that the same container has different programs, and how you will react to that. And to understand, it's the same like the inhabitants of Dresden. The castle is in the heart of everybody. So, and they are so proud still today. So they had ceremonies in this time, 20 years ago, when we did the competition. They were celebrating in front of a ruin with this kind of very proud clothes, music, and to be there. So it's very sensitive. And what the pupils' view usually or wish was to get the Renaissance castle back, because they were still fighting to be the same proudness of the Dresden people. So that is today also, he has a Porsche, I need also a Porsche. So that is also a misthinking sometimes. So how can I showcase my importance in culture? But the interesting thing was that in this time there was a donator of minerals. So it was a woman. She was collecting minerals. She was incredibly rich, also coming from Saxony. She was the owner of Schwarzkopf, this shampoo company. And she had a huge collection of minerals, and she said, I will donate these minerals to the city of Freiberg, because my family is coming from there, and the city has the oldest university of mountaineering knowledge, which are only 2 exist in Germany, and they were based also on the kings of Saxony to found that, to have mathematicians there, to know how you harvest that things and so on. So she knew this. And then there was, as they were mining 1100 years, since the 11th century silver, they had a huge depot of literature and of all documents of how to mine of this. So it's an archive of this kind of knowledge. So we started in that competition, and we said, okay, if there is this huge knowledge, we have to protect that knowledge. As we are, let's say, based in a Western culture, we need a reference for this, and we came with the Ark. We have to build an Ark like Ark of Noah, and to protect these things. Now, 20 years later, I'm looking totally different to that image. And maybe we never saw that mistake, what happened there. Because Noah did one thing. He heard there is a kind of loot of waters coming, and what he did, he invited, as a non-vegetarian, only animals to survive. And nobody was talking about how the plants survived that kind of flood. So the plants survived the flood, not in a boat. So maybe they are more intelligent than all this kind of meat-based biomass, what was also saved in this thing. So that is quite interesting, because also how we're doing science now, or what you're doing there. So, but still we were working on these things to maintenance that and to integrate this in the castle. So that was clear that with the climate issues, we couldn't contain this kind of huge knowledge thing in the castle. So we had to destroy the wood structure, which was 200 years old, and to build a kind of big ship which could survive if there's a new flood coming. I don't know why we were thinking of this, climate crisis or political restrictions. So we built in that, we made a proposal to build inside of that kind of form. A second, maybe also you see it's a kind of bigger gesture than in Dresden, what we did with the small wooden things. We do a kind of bunker for this kind of forever to be protected knowledge of humans. And this we integrated in this. There was a kind of technical invention that we said, okay, we have to ventilate this. There's also kind of structure which has to support the ancient thing. So this object was supporting also the ancient building. And inside, let's say, all these levels, they were destroyed before. So that was only just the IKEA Billy wood structure, only 200 years old, of wood, which were wood beams of 20-meter longness. And it was interesting this time. Also, the city was looking how we can offer this on the market. So there was guys from Austria, they're coming because they were building nice chalets in the mountains. And they said, they're beautiful, I get this wood for a low price. And they were transporting this, because they have a lot of wood, but they were transporting this old wood through Austria and to rebuild the things. And in the second part of the museum, we tried to defend this wood structure, and we said we will expose the minerals there. A mineral is so small, you will go there a little bit with your head down, so the high is not a problem. But then there was also this problem that the king of Freiberg, he had relations to the king of Dresden, which was the minister, and he said, these architects, they were winning this competition, but I don't want this narrow floors, so I want big halls for my minerals. And so we went with the project to the minister, and the minister said, yeah, you have this part, it's okay here, but on the other part you have to take also the wood out. You have to make 2 levels of things, and we want to have big halls. And inside of us, it was kind of what we are doing now. We're losing the project, we say, fuck you, or we find the kind of tricky way in between. So that, let's see afterwards. So that we took out, we built these things, this in-between space, this big arch. And by this kind of passion of what we learned from Dresden, we were working on a lot of small objects, how to contain one to each other, how craftsmanship is going, how can we prefabricate that elements. And then we found also, let's say, historical references from this kind of corn movement in the building, so that form-related things, how they can hold the facade, how we can turn them in a kind of technical element. And really to expose them also, and to showcase them. And we said also it's like a kind of hard wire. It could even have lamps inside that you see if nobody's working. And then we said how knowledge is exposed. We had the reference of the wolf of the Roman Empire, who is feeding the 2 Romanus and those. And so we said this kind of object of getting knowledge from something, because we were collecting a lot of, let's say, industrial references. And then we said, okay, if we are under that huge amount of mass of knowledge, you have this kind of rooms where you can study, let's say, the history. So you're under that kind of depot, so it's not a ship which is ground-based, so it's a little bit like a airspace, a little bit lifted up. And underneath, you have places of communication. You get the books down, which are very raw, and then you can study, and then they go up in the archive. So that is happening underneath. And then we were working also on this kind of ornament, which comes later, and that is the thing. And then we developed different types to discuss the levels of cultural inspection, of cultural references, and by trying to create a dialogue between, let's say, not the client as the guy who gave us the contract, really to understand the citizen itself and this proudness, what you saw before. They have still in the university teaching all this kind of resources, of minerals, of mathematics of minerals, and let's say all the mineral knowledge is based there. We said, okay, we have to travel also in mines. So then we start as architects. We traveled in 2 mines. We visit the salt mines, which is in the south, let's say between Berlin and Hamburg. So you have a lot of them. If you go there down, it's 200 meters you're going down. There's very hot, even 400 meters they're going down. You have to drive 30 kilometers with a car. The entire citizen plan looks like Barcelona, because they just can harvest parts of it. If otherwise, the earth will get crashed. And we tried to imagine how it is. And then you were totally surrounded by that minerals. And then we went also in the silver mines. We were visiting all this kind of mineral world to discover it. And it's incredible, let's say, impressive. And there's 2 things. One is that you believe that these forms of minerals, they're coming from an artificial intelligence, so it's not nature-made. You think it's kind of it has to be programmed by computers or by something else. You don't believe that nature can do that. And then also by be surrounded of all of this, how we can transform this in this kind of castle. And there were, let's say, these were miners there, and you had this kind of objects. So there are really like that, or really, really big, or very small in all scales. And what are the tools to do that? So that are the tools. Everybody has this as a kind of symbol. It was a hammer. So one is the hammer, and the other one is the thing where you have to put on to destroy the stone. So that's why they have these two tools. And so by harvesting and mining that things, there were a lot of skills. What we said, okay, how we can transform this in an architectural project also. So there's ornament-wise, it's just the graphics, but also the entire concrete structure on the end, the surface, was not only the framework. So we said, okay, we can also, let's say, destroy this very Japanese or Swiss high-quality concrete. We go with a lower quality in it. And then we also showcase the surface that the ingredients are visible, how the concrete is made as a modern material. Today, as concrete is really as a kind of hard discussion material, it's still a kind of the question how we have our relationship to a kind of material and how we showcase it, and for what we are using the material in the right manner. So that is also a question. So I either would say it's forbidden to use concrete or wood, but use the material in an intellect way. That is much more the thing. And it was interesting that you could see also the traces of the supporting structure for the reinforcement which came out. So it's a little bit like reading this. And the second was when you go in the mineral world, you discover that the most of the colors, you have colors that are coming from the, let's say, organic world, and you have the most of the colors that are coming from the mineral world. And they are so rich that you also sometimes don't believe that how they are coming out and how they get produced. So not chemical produced, but really in the mineral world you can discover them. And then we said also we have to integrate this kind of color codex in the building. So we found different ways where it is. And then we had also with the scientists, when we did the exposition also afterwards, this for instance, minerals, they are just appearing if you have X-ray and different lights on it. And afterwards, if you look at these mirrors, they're just gray. So that is also a kind of this kind of scientific research. And so there were colors were appearing when the light in the night goes on. So that is the entrance building, what we add there. You had the two persons sharing the building. And that was also this question of reprogramming, because you had on the end 4 users in the building. One was the archive, the second was the mineral collection, a third one was a restaurant, and the fourth one was the city itself to use the inner courtyard for public events. So we create this kind of unique things coming from the Druze. There was offices, for instance, where it was held in white, and when you came out of the office, we did the kind of entire green. Looks a little bit crazy on the image now with the beamer, but there's a green place. It was like this artificial thing. You are in the forest and you breathe a little bit out of your concentrated work, and you meet to each other. You had the silent ones where the library is, and other parts they referring to that things of this kind of color code. And that was interesting that when we did this, the client was really disappointed how to do that. He was scared about that, but he had no time to intervene because the project has to run very fast. And sometimes it's very good if you have a project which runs very fast because the client cannot come with other ideas. And you can say, no, I'm responsible for aesthetics, trust me. And then after, during the opening, when the opening was, there was an actor who played the king of the castle. And he was wearing in these clothes, like you saw before, in this very colorful clothes. So this actor was not talking with us before, and he came and he made in the ceremony, he explained, he invited all the public in the castle back, and then he explained why these are so colorful, and that he is that they're responding to his power. And he had for each color a story. He said, yeah, this green and yellow is Saxonian today, and this magenta is the kind of innocence of Catholics. So it was crazy that he even added another layer of culture on it, and everybody was convinced on the end, okay, that has something to do with culture, so we will accept that. That is also sometimes interesting how you're building up, let's say, projects and ideas. And then, of course, we use this kind of iconographic things for them, as let's say it's like a curtain where you're looking through as a filter, an analog filter, to understand why you are there. It was like a pattern, and the other thing is, it couldn't be like it is in Dresden made. That this kind of patterns, they're very handcrafted. So we had only the chance with the budget to do it with industrial production, which takes something and to do it in a low-cost way, but still to keep it in a kind of manner in between this kind of representation of beautiness, but otherwise it's just a repetition of something. And so this we did, and then there were also small things to inject, what we also used later in school buildings now today. So we came by learning how this kind of culture is working of the miners, that we had all this kind of visits also in the changing rooms of them, how you're doing that we said, okay, it has also to be a kind of social interaction at the time, to share. So we tried to convince the client, for instance, for the 2 toilet tracks of males and females, we say, no, okay, they can maybe separate in gender to do her work, but they come together to wash her hands together. So we integrated an object that they can wash their hands together, and it's much less beautiful to see people meeting each other and washing hands and talking. And then we start also to integrate this in school projects, but every time the people say, yeah, wow, it's dangerous. So we built 2 schools where we have this object also there, but the projects are every time made with 2 doors. So you have the boys and the girls entering, and then there's 1 room with this thing, just for emergency. If it doesn't work, they can put a wall inside and to separate it again. So to convince clients to change also program attitudes is sometimes very difficult. But still, if you are able to convince them, is also, let's say, very nice also. It's very rare, but you can do that. And then, of course, we worked in this kind of thing, like we did, like also a lot of projects, maybe in the Dresden castle is done, how you compare new and old. So there were ancient structures of the wood construction, which we really integrated in the kind of reading room. So they're also carrying the building. So we tried to keep them and to confront them with new materials. So you have the archive rooms, the preparation rooms. We conserved also that thing. So we went in all parts very brutal, as you saw before, with this kind of arch. Then we had also parts, you see that brick wall behind, so we also showcased the existing material. And you can read really the building in different ways. So we have so many layers of culture, as it is in Saxonia, if you go there, that you can read a lot of layers of culture. You don't have to go to Italy. It's also not so far. It's even better to see that. And then you can go through and you can find that thing. So that is the museum shop, which also get transformed now. It's not more like this because it's more open. It was this time the question of the client to close them. Then we had also things where we said new as old, so we also were copying old things to integrate them. So we integrate in the facade big windows, which just hiding in between all the time, because you have times of the Gothic, of the Roman, of the Corn Depot time. So there's all these kind of layers there. Then we also reproduced elements as a copy to protect the mineral collection against the light, but using also these old references. We even went through, we said we keep the central staircase like this, and we try to fight that the handrail gets protected for the heritage department, because if you have to do a new one, you have to do new norms. And so we were looking and discussing with the heritage, like, please, can you put this on the heritage that we can keep it? So also we use the regulations one each other. And then we said, okay, there is the inscription of Napoleon when he used the rooms for the military hospital. So we were able to do that, but we were not able. And then we installed lamps. This we had to do for security reasons. And then we said, but we don't paint. We let all the traces, what happened there. And then we were 2 weeks not there, and the client he paint everything in white. And he said, yeah, but this you can do in Italy, but we are in Germany, we want to have it white proper. And so there was also, you are also on the limit of things what you can do as an architect. So this heritage protection, it's just a piece of wood, a piece of metal, so usually it's not on that level, but it's tricking with them. And then if there are pieces we are missing, we had no people working on stone, so we did the same form in steel. So that refers to the Flusser text maybe or something. And then we had this kind of ancient places where you had the ancient kitchens of the castle, where today is the major, let's say, chamber of the biggest pieces and the most important one, and that's are there. So that is a little bit the thing. And then, of course, you have traces in that buildings, which is for the Dresden Castle less in discussion, because they're really discussing this to keep it in the historical manner. So they're very obsessed to keep, and they're fighting in between each other. So everybody comes with different photographs. So this is the original one, that is original. They try to, how to say, to conserve a moment which is not there. So that is a kind of question where we want to settle us down. And that is maybe also the question of the church, what they rebuilt. So where we want to settle and what is the moment we want to frozen. That's you can discuss this when you go on projects, how flexible you can be. So we had to close windows because there was the depot behind. So we used that windows as we did in the mountain hut. Also, what you saw before, we made concrete copies of them. We put them in the facade, and if you go very close, you can read these different layers of different times. So you have there windows from the time when it was really a castle. Here downstairs is there. And this is the depot. This is now all the offices. So you couldn't keep the people with such a small light because you have to follow regulations. And you can read all this kind of different layers on the facade also. And then, coming back to Flusser in a certain way, we had a kind of obsession, I don't know, so that is a little bit also reflection after 20 years. We had the codes of forms. We were obsessed by finding that kind of object which filters the corn. We said, okay, if we have a general form and we can use it everywhere by so many clients, it's a kind of DNA to inscribing as an architect in DNA in the building, which reunifies that kind of huge elements of information. Because if you have layers of 400 years in the building, and then another layer is coming, and then 4 clients are coming, how you can reunify them. And then we start, you can see if you go there everywhere in the tables, in the handlings, so this form is everywhere, even the vitrines appear. So that was like a kind of other obsession for us to protect also us, not to invent every time something, but still to have a kind of constant thing. The windows there, so it's a kind of form which comes through, and if you walk through, there are sometimes even small that is for the beamer there to in the lecture hall. So everywhere it arrives also in this kind of moment. I'm not sure if this was the right. It could be also a more simple one, but that was in this time our way to work on things. But why form? That was the thing we learned, and that is good if you can do project and you're also learning something. By being confronted every time with this kind of scientists for the collection, we learned that all knowledge of form on the end was based on mathematics on minerals, what they did there. So all the angles of the mathematical calculation, which mineral is mathematic. It's geometry. And then we also finally integrate this in the design with the landscape architect Birgit Hammer in this kind of big carpet. So we tried to create a big carpet in the inner courtyard with granite stones and asphalt. And these granite stones, they were referring to the mathematic forms of that elements. And by using different, let's say, surfaces, flat very one and rough one, they get also, when they get wet, 3-dimensional, because they keep the water in different size and with reflection. So this is a kind of link to the university where they're still studying that thing to understand the universe. And that is what finally you will find this in the museum on the end and the collection of the kings. This kind of to understand the universe and to bring them in a certain way together. And that is maybe to end my speech. To the question maybe also on you, when you now studying and when you're doing projects in this kind of big cultural distance between discovering the world, getting knowledge of something, harvesting resources, destroying resources, and how we are positioned as architects in this thing. So, and I think that is a kind of new challenge. I think for us it's not depressive because we still discover, because we continue also on that manner to work. But I think this is a little bit the challenge how to do that. And if you want a last recommendation, there is a book which we tried also to push for the students. Is a book, it's called The Mushroom on the End of the World, from an anthropologist. He's just looking at the world of a mushroom, of the Matsutake mushroom, and to understand the complexity of economy, of culture, of social things, by just looking at one resource. And that is a little bit also the question, how we could turn architecture, let's say, in the 21st and even in the century, that we can keep it. Okay, I hope it was not so boring.
Yeah, Martin Fröhlich, thank you very much for this tour de force into your world, into your Wunderkammer of ideas. And I think for the students it was, and for all of us, that was great. My lesson learned is I will never leave Dresden again, or will go to Dresden without stopping at Freiberg. I haven't seen the project so far, but I must see it. This is 100% sure. Now we are starting with a round of questions and hopefully answers from your side. Maybe there are some questions, or maybe you have to think for a minute what you could ask after this lecture.
First, there is a student question. I would take. You're a student? Give her the microphone first. That is so rare that they're asking questions.
I don't need the mic. Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
Yeah, we hear you.
There's more pressure with the mic, but okay. Yeah, thank you very much. I think my question would be, since you're integrating philosophy so much into your work, and how also like this process of keeping all of the layers, do you also integrate, how do you keep the layer of your current work in the next years? Or I'm just wondering whether this was also part of the project. If you're also thinking about, okay, in the next 20, 30 years, are my current work also going to be a layer, and then someone else is going to build on top of it? Because I think for us right now, it's also a question of whether the intervention we're doing is something that's just temporary, or something that should stay forever, or someone else is going to take it out and put something in. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think sure. There's a very rare examples where architecture get not let's say reprogrammed. So that is let's say even now, let's say with the influence on religion, even these objects which had a constant thing of 2,000 years get slowly reprogrammed, because they also have to rewrite the program maybe in a certain way. So I think there is still this kind of question of reprogramming. And that is also something what we try to integrate if it's possible in the work. And maybe that is but that is something which is also arriving by aging now, and to looking at the current work, what we did by ourselves, that this kind of thing, to do very customized objects which are only suitable for one purpose, I would be request this is the right way. So I would try to imagine, like, again, coming back to the airport in Berlin, which is now a kind of what we can do with that. And immediately we have so many ideas to do with that, because it's a kind of very strong form, and it has spatial qualities, and that is something. So for this we have to look in a certain way, and that is part of the. So today we have to do a project, and we have also to look what is behind maybe of the project, and what is so even with the knowledge of complexity what we have today. In that time they don't have this, so now we can even calculate. We try to pre-invest things of thought, and that is, I think, part of our profession in the future. So we are open for that.
You mentioned several times that you might find other architectural or other forms for to express your work. Does that have something to do that it might last longer if it's not so strong connected to one time, or what is the aspect that you say maybe we would do it different now?
We came, let's say, maybe it depends where we're coming from. So we're coming from a time where, let's say, when we studied, we were not confronted with this question of resources in a certain way. So I come from East Germany, so we were confronted with resources because we had less on the end, and we were educated by the generation, the after-war generation of the grandparents. So it's a little bit also inscribed in our let's say, education in a certain way. But of course we came very fast, and that is maybe a thing what is very special for Germany, and also our context of architecture, we came out of an architectural production after the Second World War, where a lot of things were destroyed. So we tried to rebuild things, and we tried to find a new identity. And even with the political reunion, we tried to find a new identity. So we based a lot of projects, and that was also what we did in our office, on finding identities, rebuild and repair in a certain way, but not thinking on resources. That was not the major point. So if we had to rebuild the cities, we had to rebuild them and to find what we are doing there. And the resources was sometimes what was there, then we get richer, we could also afford other things. But today, I think, and that was also in this when we did the time. So we were working, and still we're also doing that, on questioning images, identity of objects. I think now it gets even complex, and I want to integrate this in the work. It's also the question how we looking at the resources and how we looking at knowledge. What it's much more complex today. And to try to be less on this kind of ancient thinking, I need an image of something which is beautiful, but what is beautiful? That is the question, to find a different definition of that. And that is the kind of new challenge, what all of us, we have to do that in a certain way. But still, of course, if there is a kind of form which is recognizable, it's also even easier to compare and maybe to find other ways, which is maybe neutral, for instance, of something. Yeah, that is maybe the kind of, just to explain where this kind of very strong reference of object comes from, in this kind of, which is also still, I think, a challenge of the time, because forms, in ancient time, form was a kind of very, let's say, catalog of objects what we had. Today, forms get generated hundreds and thousands of information. So you can produce on your computer hundreds of forms. And we just have to, why we are doing that? Why is this form like this? And if there's a reason behind that, then you can do that. But don't do it just because I like it. So that is the thing. And you have to think one step behind of this. And there's a lot of projects they're looking like that on that.
Any more questions?
Darf ich jetzt?
Sorry.
No, first of all, it was really, I just heard the word, it was a power lecture, and it really fits perfect in the let's say, halftime of our workshop. And so the last project is a very powerful project, and there are a lot of inputs, and you already explained how you got the ideas of, but still I'm very interested in the design process in your office. So how do you work with your team? Is it, do you start by historical workshops? I think there's so many ideas in this one project, and I don't ask how you persuaded all the clients to go with you, but I'm very interested in the design process in your office, with your architects, with your teams.
There is no, I kicked it out. There is first, of course, the thing is that a project is not my project. That is the first thing, because it's every time a result of a collaborative work. So that is something. I think if an architect says that is my project, I will present that, we have to use the word "we did it," because otherwise it's a lie. The second, so you have to be open to integrate other voices also in that. That is sure, which is sometimes not only the architect. We were using usually every time an image of Ellen Wexler, which calls "The coffee seeks the same levels." There are 4 persons sitting around the table with 4 coffee cups, and they link with tubes to each other. And if you lift up one coffee cup, you get all the coffee of the other ones on your body. So everybody has to lift them up. So that was the kind of discussion how we can equilibrate. Of course, then you will also lose strengthness. You need somebody who guides. You have a kind of project leader who is doing that, of course, and also people they like to listen. But of course, in a kind of way, for the Freiberg project, for instance, there were different phases. So the competition phase was the big idea how to do that, with this kind of let's say we were winning the competition because we had the strong idea to let the castle as it is, because there are a lot of architects participate, and they said, okay, they made additions, they put something on, and we said, no, the castle is part of the form, and we have to respect that form, and we do everything inside, more or less. And then all these other layers, what they were showing there, they were processly or in the process developed by knowing more, by getting more knowledge, by mining, let's say, the history of the building. So that is really a result of 5 years work on that. And that was also a time we were very young. We had no idea how to run an office financially. We were not looking at how many details we will draw, so it was unlimited for us. So it was like put kids in a room with a lot of toys and he will play with everything. Let's say today, if you have an office with a lot of employees, okay, stop that, he's too ambitious. You have also to control this kind of uncontrolled energy. And to say, keep it, we have also other projects to do maybe, but that is visible in that project. So sometimes, also if we now as, let's say, professionals now, you're looking at this, okay, they were not earning money with that project, but they had fun. Not earning money, so even they were on the limit to survive. So let's see. So that is one thing. So you have to, of course, you find processes, but still it's a kind of discussion. What we try to keep is not every time easy. It depends also in the moment. There are times where the happiness of to collaborate is easier, and other times there are more, let's say, under stress. Then it's not possible. You need still a kind of strong idea. As we also lost a lot of competitions against you, there were the time more in the kind of clear discussion and the strong decision. It's about, how to say, maybe we can compare it with another thing. It's about the story about the decision making. And we are using at the moment, there's also another book, it quotes from Barry Schwartz, it quotes The Paradox of Choice. And he wrote about the thing, if you have more choices, you will not decide. And if you have less choices, it's much easier to decide. And if you have a decision, then you start to adapt the decision to the current situation. So the book is based on the thing. He went in the shop to buy a blue jeans, and the guy said, yeah, you want the blue jeans? Okay, which one? Stonewash, slim fit, down fit, He was naming all of them. He said, shit, I want the jeans. And then he was 2 hours in the shop. He tried all the trousers, and then he went out, and he was unhappy after 1 hour, because he had the idea, maybe the other one could be better than this what I have now. And that is the kind of problem of the current society, or what we have also. So we have to teach usually our team members, our students, our kids, to make the right decision for the right purpose. And then if you follow a decision, to be crazy or creative enough to adapt them and to develop them forward, and not to feel an unhappiness and to say, it's not that. And that is very often in competitions. You have something, you did this, and then you still believe, shit, it's not the good one or something, but you can still adapt this also with the client. So that is also get this castle, and all of them on the end get adapted in the discourse with the client and the current situation itself. So do never think as an architect to come with something and you believe that you will build this till the end. Try to be open, even you will be more sustainable, you listen to the people, you will understand, and you have to guide them, and that is your thing. So you have to help people to make decisions and to work with them together. And that is a little bit very complex answer for a simple question, but it's not easy to answer. So, yeah. Now he will tell all the lies what they said about Saxony. He will correct the things.
Thank you for this good question and this good answer. I remember the competition for the coin cabinet in the palace very well. And you win the competition because of the mixture of being concentrated in a chamber, and in the next room you have the wide view, so you can feel relaxed, so you can breathe. The interesting thing is the same topic you have. We need spaces for being concentrated, for work. And on the other hand, this is what we don't have until now. You visited it last week. We have not the spaces for breathing, for have a wide view and so on. And that's why it's really interesting. My question to you is, we spoke a lot about old castles, about history, showcases, minerals, stones, and so on. When you think about modern offices, work 2.0 and so on. What is your first impression in this topic?
That's the building what they destroyed, what was destroyed from Walter Henn, the office building of Osram. So there's a reference, there's a story of office building, how they get involved. What is today an office building? I think first it's the house which is in 20 years not an office building, which is in 20 years something else first. I will try to tackle, now we're doing a project for a mobility hub, and we convince the client to do also to integrate this as a kind of office afterwards, which means 2 meter 10 ceiling high. It will not fit for offices, so how you can deal with that? So that is one question. One answer maybe, but you have, I don't know which we visit your low offices, but if you have, let's say for instance, if we invest in bigger heights, like for instance what nobody is doing that in schools, we put ventilation in it, but we try to make everything, we control everything mechanical, the mechanization takes command of Gideon. But nobody is investing in architecture. So for instance, what you cannot change there maybe in rooms to breathe, what you mean. So different heights, what the castle has itself. That I would invest, also if it's modern and new, for instance. Not to work on this kind of restriction, to break the norms, to say we do analog architecture in a certain way. Give us the money for ventilation systems to architecture. It would be even better. We made calculations. Of all the ventilation system in schools, of the classrooms, instead to take this money and to build the house, I don't know, 2 meter higher, and to have that in the rooms. So that is something what's very difficult to defend. Nobody will listen to you because the norms are written like this. And yeah, if you want to meet your colleagues or not, that will change. There were times you had boxes, you had other times there were bigger rooms to meet. That is the kind of attitude we have still in our office. The people going with masks, they're not stopped with this. I don't understand that, but I have to respect that. So there's time will change. And these offices which are coming there, pay attention what is furniture and what is architecture itself. So what is what you can move and what it will go, and what is the really building itself. So that is maybe also something which is important to let's say to put in different categories of things.
One last question, maybe. Stefan is already
maybe
looking.
There are 20 other ones.
So do you read?
Can we turn the lights to there? It's easier. Yeah.
So do you read Flusser to your clients? So is this philosophical
No, that is,
part of your communication with the client?
No. Let's say we had not a lot of conversation with Flusser. So that was coming out of the the way how we teach to the students and how we let's say also get teach ourselves. So I was reading Flusser when I was a student, so that was my time to discover, because we're coming from an analog world. We draw with hands, and then we had the first computer programs, and he was totally rising up also in that time. I think it's time to read him again, to bring him back on this question of this media representation and what is image, what is reality. Today I'm using references for students like, you saw Matrix, and they're looking to me, Matrix, what is this? And then somebody told me, yeah, guy, that is 20 years ago. You cannot use this in the front of a student, Matrix. I said, okay, who knows Matrix? About the new film, because it came out last time. You knew it before? Okay, but still it's only 50%. You see that. It was for us an iconic thing. So you see time change very fast. It's crazy. So we say, how we try to talk clients is also not only about budget. So if I think, let's say in Freiberg, for instance, we talk with the client like a worker in the mines, and that was really, let's say, also he could understand the things. So if you have to build a house for a doctor, don't explain him Mies, explain, or Gordon Matta Clark, explain him a chirurgical cut on a knee, and try to talk to him about prosthetic design or something, and then he will you can adapt to his, let's say, language also in a certain way. And that is more the thing, as you could or talk with a teacher about Emile and Rousseau, how you teach, and about Pestalozzi. And that is this kind of what you can discover in the profession, that you also can learn, let's say, different things. And we less had the clients where we came with references of Corbusier, Mies van der Rohe, Louis Kahn, and to pay attention which name we can use today. Okay, I was correct, no? Good. Sullivan we can use. There.
Thank you. My question is rather, I want to ask about for your opinion. So you spoke about the reuse of for example, for the Colosseum becoming a textile fabric. When you said that, I thought about the book Ways of Seeing by John Berger, because he says seeing comes before words. And then there is a painting from Henri Matisse. You see a bag, but it says underneath a bird. But you always think of it as a bag, because you see a bag. So if you change a stadium to a housing unit, how do you think people will pursue it? Do you think they will feel how will be the psychology of these people? Do you think the change is going to be effective, or the psychology will be somehow different?
That's another lecture if you want, if you have 1 hour. That tackles a topic first that today how we perceive things. It's influenced by, let's say, we get educated. No, not we get educated. This generation there get educated by text and letters and reading things behind. We get educated by images. Without that, we are not traveling with it. So there's a kind of misunderstanding of what we see, what we think, what we see, coming to matrix back on the end. So between the reality, what is there, and what we really know, and what is possible in a certain way. What is this feeling? Coming back to the stick, for instance. If you are in the forest today, my first impression, if I'm looking there on a stick, I would find a stick like Gandalf. But this guy has a beautiful stick, and he can even make wizards with it. But this knowledge is not my knowledge, what I have. It's come from media influences on a certain way. And they are so real today, even that you believe that has to be somewhere, this thing. I know a lot of people, students, even when we travel, they want to buy this kind of, what is this magic stick of Harry Potter. You can buy them, and so to have that kind of forms, or to have the gun of Han Solo, I don't know. So that is the thing. There's a disconnection between these two elements. And the interesting thing for us, what we try also to discuss, that what we see, the psychological thing is not that finally the form is not responsible for that. It's the social composition, how you open the door to the neighbor, how you have fresh air there, how you enter in the house, what is the free space. So it's much more complex of this. And this is our tools as an architect to explain that. And it's not just that form and this visual thing what is there. And this is maybe the way what we have to do much more, because today also in the office we say we have Pinterest clients, so they're coming also with this kind of thing, of visualizations. And there's a disconvenience between these two things. So it was in the time when we start the offices, they're coming with, they want to have a Schwarzwaldhütte on the Costa Brava, because I bought now a plot there. And you say, okay. And then you have to say, that's the form, what you want to have, and how you can, not to say you get a Catalan house. That is not the question. You will not win to get him. So you have to break off this kind of misunderstanding of the image and the text, let's say. And that is a capacity, and the text and also of data today, even more.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. You can make an example. I did some. That was what we used. Try to go on the Bing or Google image research, and try to write. Look for a type, tower, and then write one word tower and look which images you get out of this, and then change the languages, and do it in all languages you can find. And that is funny. And then do a statistic out of this. What the word in different languages. It's also the Tour du Babel, what it offers you. And that is a funny game on the evening. You can do that, and then you print that, and then you can find out tower, and if you turn it in something, then you also can see how language is influencing this kind of image question. That is quite funny, because there are some languages, if you Russian tower, you have all the Paris towers. So they're very related tower, it's the Paris. So that is not very scientific, but it's still a kind of showcasing that thing. No, but they do it parallel. They all of them they are digital.
My friends, I asked them to different friends, Italian, German, Turkish, and I asked them, how do you describe a house? What is the form? And then at the end, they all drew the same thing, a triangle on top of a square. So, but we live in very different things, but still we think a house is a triangle on top of a square.
Yeah, but that is usually the thing what architectural education is doing. The students are coming with this image of a house like this, and they're leaving with the image of a house like this. So that is anyway the thing of architectural education.
So my proposal is to continue discussing with Martin Fröhlich, and I'm very sorry because I forgot to introduce Michael John. He asked an important question before. Maybe it's important to know him and maybe to discuss with him also tonight when we have a glass of wine or whatever. He is the technical director of the Staatliche Kunstsammlungen in Dresden. He is the initiator of this workshop somehow, I would say. And he will be part of our jury, if you want to accept this word jury. I said we want to help you to make good projects. Martin Fröhlich will be part of our group tomorrow, and we will have also Chris Middleton tomorrow in the house once again. So, and Nico will not join because his wife celebrates her birthday tomorrow. Okay, so he not. But we will help you tomorrow to discuss the works, and as you said, the result of a good design, or the good design, to put it in another word, is always the result of a good dialogue. And this is what we want to do tomorrow and what we want to do right now in the other room. Thank you very much, Martin Fröhlich.